Welcome to the deep dive. You've shared your sources, and, well, our mission is simple. We dig into them, extract the key insights, basically give you a shortcut to understanding what's going on.
Yeah, cutting through the noise.
Exactly. And today, we're looking at this really interesting YouTube transcript. It's from De Springplank voor Vuurtrek, a conversation between the host Pim and Claire Van Rijk.
Yes. She works with women on connecting with their divine feminine consciousness. That's her focus.
Right. So we're going to unpack their discussion. Lots of themes. Personal shifts, societal transformation, intuition, navigating change. Quite a lot to get into.
Definitely. Where should we start? It's quite dense.
Well, maybe the big picture stuff, the societal shifts they talk about.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense. So Claire brings up this perspective connected to Pluto being in Aquarius. Now, she notes the specific alignment she mentions isn't quite right anymore, astronomically speaking, but the core idea.
The vibe of it.
Exactly. The vibe is this feeling of pressure, a real need for transformation personally in businesses, even governments. The alternative, she suggests, is things kind of breaking down.
Because of a lack of integrity.
That's the idea she puts forward, a perceived lack of integrity leading to instability. It really sets a frame, That change isn't just coming, it's like necessary.
Right. And then it gets even more specific, talking about an accelerated awakening. And this idea, which is pretty unique, that the Netherlands and Belgium might have a higher concentration of what they call highly aligned souls.
People with higher consciousness.
Yeah. And they link this to water as an information carrier, which is, well, it's a different way of thinking about how location might influence spiritual development.
It really is. And if you connect that back, it kind of provides a backdrop for the shift they discuss from an individualistic focus.
Me.
To more of a we collective. And this idea that purely vampiric systems, things that just take energy and don't give back, are just unsustainable in the long run.
Right. It hints at a fundamental change in how we relate to each other, how society is structured.
Definitely. And then there are these little symbolic nuggets they pull out.
Like the number 8.
Yeah, the number 8. And the Pope passing away at age 88, they connect it to abundance, the infinity symbol.
It makes you pause, doesn't it? Thinking about meaning in numbers, in events.
It does, and how we interpret things. The Pope's death on Easter Resurrection, while Klaus Schwab steps down, also at 88, are they just coincidences?
Or signs of deeper shifts?
Exactly. They don't claim to know for sure, but it feeds into this feeling that, yeah, maybe global leadership is changing in significant ways.
And speaking of Schwab, the conversation gets pretty pointed when they discuss his successor.
Ah, yes. Claire expresses real concern there.
About his past views on water.
Yeah.
Specifically, whether it's a fundamental human right.
Right, referencing his time with Nestlé and the situation in Ethiopia. It brings up some very critical questions about the values driving potential future global leadership.
It really grounds the discussion, doesn't it? Connecting these big ideas to tangible things like access to water.
Absolutely. It highlights the potential real-world impact of the philosophies guiding people in power.
And flowing from that, they introduce this idea of needing to move towards a tenfold return mindset.
Benefiting people and the planet, not just profit.
Yeah. They even mention Jacques Fresco and the Venus Project, sort of painting a picture of a more integrated, sustainable future.
Which, thinking back to the transformation point, offers a kind of vision for what that change could look like, moving beyond purely extractive models.
And that naturally leads to the bigger philosophical, moral questions they see coming up over the next, 14 years or so.
Seems like it. Big questions ahead.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to the personal journey, finding your soul mission.
Right. And Claire's perspective is interesting here. She sees it as very organic.
Not something you can just, decide on Monday morning.
Exactly, not forced. She compares it to Maslow's hierarchy,
Yeah.
Basic needs met first. And it often involves dark nights of the soul, learning through mistakes, trial and error.
Take some pressure off, maybe. The idea that it's okay if it's messy.
I think so. And what really stands out is this concept of the wounded healer archetype.
Chiron, in mythology.
Yes, the idea that your soul mission is often connected to your deepest wounds, to profound challenges, even trauma. These initiation tests, she talks about rejection, humiliation.
They can actually be catalysts.
That's the idea, that our biggest struggles can become the source of our greatest gifts to the world. It's quite a powerful reframing.
Now, her specific work involves helping women connect with their divine feminine consciousness. Can you unpack that term a bit for us?
Sure. Essentially, it's about women reconnecting with that innate feminine energy, which is seen as linked to a larger divine feminine principle.
Okay.
And through that connection, the idea is they can step into their full power, manifest abundance, create healthier relationships.
So in simpler terms, it's about rediscovering their true selves.
Pretty much, yeah. That's how Claire puts it, too. Getting back to who you truly are underneath all the layers.
And apparently that's not always easy for women. She mentions obstacles.
Significant ones, yeah. She points to historical cycles, these deep archetypal traumas, like the witch wound.
The what now?
The witch wound. It's this concept of ancestral trauma passed down from the times of witch hunts and persecution. Fears around speaking truth, using intuition, being powerful.
Wow, okay. So historical trauma.
And also ongoing societal programming, she says. Things that kind of condition women away from embracing that feminine essence.
It highlights how much the past, collective and personal, can still influence us, huh?
Absolutely, often subconsciously. The witch wound idea is a really potent way to frame some of those maybe hidden fears or limitations women might feel.
They also discuss the dynamic between yang and yin energy.
Masculine and feminine energies, yeah.
Yeah.
Yang being the active, outward energy, yin being the receptive, inward energy.
And the observation is that yang often dominates in society.
That's their take, which can then make it harder for women to fully embody their feminine power. This leads into that whole complex discussion about traditional roles versus
the pressure to conform to more masculine norms, maybe in the workplace or other areas.
Exactly. It creates a potential conflict, doesn't it, between internal inclination and external expectation. How do you find that balance?
It's a huge question.
Yeah. And Claire shares a bit about her own journey, her awakening starting around 27, intensifying at 33.
Driven by global issues and astrology.
Seems like a mix, observing what was happening in the world, plus things like Neptune being in Pisces, which is astrologically linked to spirituality and dissolution of boundaries.
And a spiritual retreat was a key moment.
A tipping point, she calls it. Something shifted her beyond just intellectual understanding into a more embodied knowing.
Okay. Let's talk intuition. How do they describe that?
They frame it as a result of alignment. Head, heart, and gut all lining up.
That inner yes feeling.
Kind of, when all parts of you are congruent. And crucially, they distinguish this soul feeling or soul truth from feelings driven by, say, a wounded ego or past hurts.
So learning to tell the difference is key.
Absolutely. They also mention zero-point energy, this idea of a still, quiet, energetic state where inner guidance can come through more clearly.
Interesting. And Pim shares his own experience using ayahuasca.
He does, yeah. As a way he opened his connection to the divine, his intuition. It just shows there are many paths, you know?
Right. Not just one way.
And they also highlight simpler things. Solitude, being in nature.
Just creating space to listen.
Exactly, quieting the external chatter to hear the internal guidance. Sometimes it's that straightforward.
Okay, relationships. Always a big topic. They make a distinction between soul-driven and karmic relationships.
Yeah, a pretty clear one. Karmic relationships, in their view, are often based on control, manipulation.
Not freedom and love.
Right, whereas soul-driven connections are defined by those qualities.
And karmic ones often stem from shared wounds.
Shared wounds, past traumas, leading to patterns like codependency, power imbalances. It sounds intense.
And they suggest a lot of current relationships might fit this description.
That's the implication, yeah. Which is quite a thought. Makes you reflect on your own dynamics, doesn't it?
It does. So the alternative is soulmate relationships.
Which they describe as heart-centered, built on respect, helping each other grow, heal. That sounds much more appealing.
Definitely. Then they get into even more specific terms: twin flames, twin rays, twin souls.
Right. These are framed as like higher dimensional connections, part of a path towards greater cosmic awareness.
And twin souls are rarer, encountered at higher states of consciousness.
That's the idea presented. 5.5D60 consciousness, apparently. It adds some layers to these terms that get thrown around a lot.
Well, especially twin flame. There's so much focus on that idea.
But Claire makes a really important point here. Sometimes what people think is a twin flame might actually be a more difficult, even narcissistic dynamic. Her main message seems to be, any relationship, whatever label you put on it, can be an initiation test, a test of your self-worth.
So the focus should be internal.
Exactly. Cultivating wholeness within yourself. Non-attachment, not clinging desperately to the outcome. That's the real work, regardless of the relationship type.
And this connects to activating the inner king or inner queen.
Yes, that internal balance of masculine and feminine energies within yourself. That's the foundation for healthy relating.
They also mention these dynamics. Blood bag and vampire.
Uh-huh. The codependent giver, blood bag, and the energy drainer, a vampire. Common unhealthy patterns. The goal is to move beyond that to inner sovereignty.
Where you're not relying on someone else for your energy, your sense of self.
Precisely. They also bring up the devilish triangle, persecutor, rescuer, victim, classic drama roles in dysfunctional relationships.
And how people in karmic setups might look outside the relationship for fulfillment. Addictions, affairs.
Yeah, because the core connection, the inner satisfaction, isn't there. It's a symptom of that lack.
Right. And this idea that being repeatedly drawn to unreachable love is actually about your own lack of self-love.
Yeah.
That's deep.
It really puts the onus back on your own inner state, doesn't it? It's a projection.
Claire also observes that many successful women can still struggle in relationships.
Yeah, because maybe they haven't taken full self-responsibility in that area or aren't fully embodying their own power in their intimate lives. External success doesn't automatically fix internal patterns.
Right. And finally, just staying in relationships without that soul connection. It leads to stagnation, seeking validation elsewhere.
That's the gist. It underlines how vital that genuine, deep connection feels for long-term well-being in a relationship.
Okay, let's shift to navigating external resistance, like wanting to make a big change moving abroad is the example they use.
Ah, yes. The fear that holds people back.
Even when you know something isn't working, a job, a relationship where you live, that lack of courage to actually leave. Many people feel that, I think.
Definitely. And their advice: cultivate a strong inner home. The sense of security and belonging within yourself that isn't dependent on where you physically are. If you have that, you can put down roots anywhere. It's about inner resilience.
That's empowering. They also touch on the idea that people from, say, the Netherlands or Belgium, with their particular mindset.
Entrepreneurial spirit, maybe directness.
Right, that they could actually contribute something valuable elsewhere in the world.
It links back to that earlier point about the concentration of aligned souls, potentially. That these qualities could be beneficial globally. It's an interesting take on interconnectedness.
And they connect this global citizenship idea to the astrology again. Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries.
Suggesting a long-term trend towards perhaps dissolving borders, breaking down old structures. It gives a bigger context to individual desires for movement or change.
But practically speaking, making a huge move. It's easy to get stuck in overthinking, right?
Oh, completely. Analysis paralysis. Their advice is basically, don't try to figure it all out at once. Take small steps, guided by intuition.
Trust your gut feeling on the next step.
Yeah. They mention astrocartography mapping energetically aligned places as a potential tool, which is interesting. But ultimately, it comes back to your heart, what feels right. Trusting that inner compass is more important than any external map.
Okay. Let's imagine Claire is speaking at a big conference, like MVO 2026, focusing on corporate social responsibility. What's her message for conscious leadership?
Well, based on the transcript, her core message would be about integrating spiritual intelligence into business.
Spiritual intelligence, meaning?
Things like intuition, wisdom, compassion, a non-judgmental viewpoint, bringing those qualities into how business is done, not keeping them separate, going beyond just the numbers.
And she talks about the leaders being vision.
Yes. A vision rooted in a deeper soul-driven purpose and operating from that we collective mindset, not just pure profit motive.
Which connects back to rejecting those vampiric systems.
Exactly. It's about anchoring in your own sun power, your inner strength, authenticity, vitality, and leading from that place so you're contributing, not draining.
And the king-queen archetype comes up again.
Definitely. Embodying that inner balance of masculine and feminine energies yourself as a leader. Not seeking validation externally, not falling into those rescue victim persecutor roles within the company or being a blood bag or vampire leader.
And she directly links personal inner work to business success.
Absolutely. The idea is that effective, conscious leadership starts with self-awareness. Understanding your own patterns, your own shadow.
She recommends Jungian psychology, exploring the shadow.
Yeah, referencing works like a meeting with the shadow, seeing it as crucial for understanding why you do what you do and why the organization behaves as it does.
And understanding these archetypal patterns helps predict trends.
It can offer deeper insights, yeah. A more strategic, nuanced view of the dynamics at play.
And finally, this need for discernment.
Sharp awareness. Seeing what's real versus what's illusion or delusion. And she roots this in having a healed inner child, suggesting emotional maturity is key for clear perception.
So a conscious leader is really someone doing their own deep work.
That seems to be the core message. It's not just about strategy, it's about inner transformation impacting the outer world.
Okay, let's look ahead. The astrological outlook and navigating what's coming, they highlight Saturn moving into Aries.
Right. Around late May, early June, Saturn, the planet of karma, structure, lessons, the Saturn matrix, they call it, meaning our current reality structures.
And Saturn in Aries brings out the toxic archetype of Aries.
That's the concern. Aries is ruled by Mars, energy, action, but also potentially conflict, aggression. So that transit might amplify those kinds of energies.
And then more shifts follow. Saturn conjunct Neptune, Uranus changing signs in July.
Yeah, it sounds like a period of significant energetic rearrangement is on the horizon, according to their perspective.
So how do they advise navigating this?
The key advice is don't try to avoid it, face it head on. Turn your head to the wave is the metaphor used.
Engage with it consciously rather than get swept away.
Exactly, and focus on what you can control. Self-preservation, putting on your own oxygen mask first, metaphorically speaking, and maintaining a positive mindset.
Because your internal state matters hugely in uncertain times.
Immensely. And building those deep inner roots we talked about, that inner strength is what helps you weather any storm.
Claire shares that she feels calm now, despite the changes.
Yeah, drawing on her own awakening journey. She contrasts that with how overwhelming it might feel for people just starting to awaken now, which offers some perspective.
And connecting with others is important.
Hugely. Finding like-minded people, building community. You don't have to go through big shifts alone. Support networks are vital.
What about practical tips?
Pretty grounded stuff, actually. Stay present in the here and now. Spend time in nature. Ground yourself. Meditate. Limit news intake, especially fear-based stuff. Be mindful of manipulation.
She also mentions stepping away from alternative media.
Yeah, because she found much of it became fear-driven or focused on waiting for some external savior. Her emphasis is on self-reliance, taking action yourself.
Interesting. And her take on crypto and Bitcoin?
Kind of neutral. Her priority seems to be on tangible resources, land, self-sufficiency like gardening, water collection, avoiding debt, real-world security.
But she also mentions living from prana energy.
She does, yeah, that idea of drawing energy from sunlight, life force. But she balances it with, practical preparedness still being wise. It's not either.
And the final reminder, don't give in to fear.
Because fear can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you focus on, you can manifest. So consciously choosing not to dwell in fear is crucial.
So wrapping this all up, if you, the listener, were to take away the core essence of this deep dive, what would it be?
I think it really comes down to the profound connection between everything we've discussed. Your inner work, listening to your intuition, understanding these big societal shifts, and then navigating all of it from a place of inner strength, of authenticity. It's all interwoven.
Yeah, not separate boxes. And Claire's final message really lingered with me. Stay close to yourself.
Authenticity as the highest vibration.
Exactly. Aligning who you are inside with how you show up outside. Without shame. That feels incredibly powerful.
It really does. Which leaves us, and you, with maybe a final thought to mull over.
Go on.
Reflect on what inner work truly means for you right now in the context of all these changes, personal and societal. And how could actively embracing your most authentic self be more than just personal freedom? How could it be your most powerful way to navigate whatever comes next?
That's definitely something to think about.